I, and state your name, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the same
to the same
and to the governments established in the United States
and to the governments established in the United States
and in this state
and in this state
under the authority of the people.
under the authority of the people.
I do further solemnly swear or affirm
I do further solemnly swear or affirm
that I will faithfully,
that I will faithfully,
impartially, and justly perform all of the duties of the office of Planning Board member
perform all of the duties of the office of Planning Board member
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations, everyone. And so if you would just sign this and we'll get it notarized.
That was cool.
Daniel Bear,
Here.
Elaine Becker,
Here.
Cheryl Burstein,
Here.
Diane Nagel,
Here.
Casey Goldenberg, Gaston Halbert,
Here.
Jorge Mastro Pietro,
Here.
Mark Matzel,
Here.
Miriam Salerno,
Here.
Joseph Steinberg,
Here.
Ed Zoll.
Here.
At this time, I would ask for a nomination for chairperson of the planning board.
I have a nomination. I'd like to nominate Beth Zoll. I have been on 3 different boards in this town for a period of at least 14 and a half years now. And I think that over that period of time, I've been able to become a pretty good judge of people and how they will function as members of these boards. I've watched Beth carefully since I've been a member of this board, and I have found her to be very impressive. She's very fair, very intelligent. I think she will make a very excellent chair and will, as the oath said, faithfully discharge her duties in a manner that will make us all very proud. So I would like to put her name in nomination as chair of this board.
Are there any other nominations? Is there a second?
I would like to second that.
Daniel Bear?
Yes.
Elaine Becker?
Yes.
Cheryl Burstein?
Yes.
Diane Nagel?
Yes.
Gaston Halbert?
Yes.
Miriam Salerno?
Yes.
Joseph Steinberg?
Yes.
Mark Matzel?
Yes.
Jorge Mastro Pietro?
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Send the meeting over to you.
Ensuring its transparency and its comprehensiveness. So, with that said, I would like to nominate Miriam Salerno for vice chair.
Great.
I'd like to second your words. I was very impressed also with both how much and how hard Miriam and Beth worked when in connection with the master plan. I think they make a great team, and I'm very happy to second that nomination.
Daniel Bear?
Yes.
Elaine Becker?
Yes.
Cheryl Burstein?
Yes.
Diane Nagel?
Yes.
Gaston Halbert?
Yes.
Jorge Mastro Pietro?
Yes.
Joseph Steinberg?
Yes.
Mark Matzel?
Yes.
That's all.
Yes. Great. The next item on the agenda is appointment of a planning board attorney. I don't know what has to happen further than the recommendation. So, is it similar? We
Just make a
do a
motion.
motion in a second.
Yes.
Great. I'm happy to make the motion to nominate the current attorneys. So it's Valerie as well as the Buzak Law Group
Right.
at a whole.
Thank you.
I'm happy to make that motion. If anybody would like to second.
Second?
Oh. Second.
Daniel Bear?
Yes.
Elaine Becker?
Yes.
Cheryl Burstein?
Yes.
Diane Nagel?
Yes.
Gaston Halbert?
Yes.
Jorge Mastropietro.
Yes.
Joseph Steinberg.
Yes.
Miriam Solano.
Yes.
That's all.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Sure. Okay, following item is the appointment of the planning board secretary. And so for that position, I'm also happy to nominate our faithful secretary to continue on steadfast through the next year. I'll make that nomination for Eileen.
I'll second.
Do we have to ask her if she's willing to serve?
Do you accept said nomination? We haven't been asking
Yeah,
anybody
second thoughts
tonight,
there,
so.
why?
Who was the second?
I second.
Miriam.
Daniel Bear.
Yes.
Elaine Becker.
Yes.
Cheryl Bursky.
Yes.
Diane Agron.
Yes.
Gaston Halbert.
Yes.
Jorge Mastropietro.
Yes.
Joseph Steinberg.
Yes.
Miriam Solano.
Yes.
That's all.
Yes. Okay.
Condolences.
Before we continue on, should we just sit where we're sitting for tonight, or do we switch, or what do you prefer we do?
It probably, I mean, I don't know if you wanna have your vice chair next week, it doesn't, I don't know, if you wanna just stay the
It's
same.
okay to sit.
Just stay today.
We're comfortable,
Yeah,
I
we're
think we
good
all
for
have
today.
lots of
Yeah.
papers, so why don't we just stay put where we are for tonight, and we'll
We're working on it.
find a new place next meeting, that's fine, thank you. Okay, we had one set of minutes that we received, and I believe enough members of the board had the opportunity to review it. So I don't have the date of those minutes on my
Madam Chairman,
thing, but
there was one change that I've already mentioned to Eileen.
thank you.
Mr. Futter's name is
Yes,
spelled
the
with
T's.
T's, not
We
D's.
did hear that as well. We'll put that on autocorrect, I don't know how that would have happened, but yes,
With
thank you.
that, with that one change, I will move that the minutes be
Glad Mitch
accepted.
isn't here tonight to see it.
Great, do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Diane. Okay,
You don't have to have.
we don't have to. All, I guess, do you have a voice vote? Okay, all approve of the minutes?
Aye.
Any oppositions? Okay, thank you. So the minutes of our December meeting are approved. I don't have the date here, December 5th, December 19th, going off memory. Doesn't serve me well. Okay. Memorializations. We don't have that on for tonight. Thank you. Okay, so then tonight's first and only application is 18013 for the Pingree School. I invite.
Ready to proceed.
I'm ready to proceed. Please state your name and.
I will.
Great, you're good to go.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Roger Remainer from the Summit Office of Lindenberry, McCormick, Estabrook, and Cooper. We represent the applicant, the Pingree Corporation, better known as the Pingree School. I think you're probably all familiar, at least to some extent, with our campus at in Short Hills. It's at Country Day Drive. It's a K through 5 campus. So Pingree's middle and upper schools are out at the Bernards Township campus. It's a buildings, a large sort of building that's been added onto through the years. That's kind of a mid-century type building. It's a stone building, kind of low rise. It was originally the Short Hills Country Day School, which merged into Pingree somewhere around 1970. And has had a few additions. Most recently in 2013, we're in front of this board for some approvals to certain improvements to the building. The application tonight has really nothing to do with the building. It's it has two facets. It's constructing an additional parking lot for some parking that we'd like to provide. We have situations where we sometimes have overflow parking and so forth. And we also have queuing at pickup and drop-off times that this lot might help address to some extent. And we have an existing playing field that we would like to just put artificial turf on, right in the same place. It is not a full-size field that you could play 11-on-11 soccer on. It's not an official field. It's a field for kids the age of the kids on our campus, small-sided soccer games, whatever other kind of recreational stuff. It has no spectator facilities, nor do we propose that. It has no lighting, nor do we propose that. It's basically going to be the same use it always has been, except that now if it rains for a week, we can use it the next day. rather than having to wait until obviously the mud goes away and so forth. The campus is approximately 28 acres. It's mostly in the R4 zone where it's improved. It's also in the C recreation conservation zone, which is where some of the lower playing fields are, including the field that the Little League uses in town. And but these improvements, except for a very tiny corner of the existing athletic field that we're going to turf, are all in the R4. We are a conditional use. I think you saw from the zoning officer's memo that we meet the conditions of the conditional use, and nothing that we're proposing tonight is going to violate any of those conditions. There's one variance that we view as relatively minor. Because this is an R4 zone, you have a fence or requirement in the zone that really is a residential fence requirement. It's a 6-foot maximum height for fencing, which makes sense around houses and so forth. We would like to put up netting around the playing field, safety netting that's 10 feet high to protect against balls flying around, and you know, it's the typical kind of safety thing you would see around an athletic field. It's netting, it's black, it's not really visible, but we feel that it's an important safety feature. So that requires a variance to make it 10 feet high rather than at 6 feet high. It's really not going to function to provide safety. So other than that, this is an application that conforms to the ordinance in all respects. So we do have 3 witnesses. I have Mr. David Fahey, who's the Associate Director of Operations, Safety, and Strategic Initiatives at Pingree. He's also happens to be an athletic coach, so he's familiar with fields. We'll talk just briefly about why we planned the project that we did. We have Brad Thompson from Bowler Engineering, who is the site engineer, who will take you through the site plans, and then we have our planner, Steve Lyden from Burgess, who briefly talk about the variance. So unless there are any questions of me, I would call my first witness.
That's great. And prior to proceeding, just for the sake of everybody in the audience, I don't know if we have members of the public, but the way that we're going to proceed is Roger will call up each witness. We will, hear the witness's credentials, choose to accept the witness, hopefully proceed with the testimony. The board will be offered the opportunity to ask questions or make comments, and then the public will be offered the opportunity to ask questions or make comments for each person giving testimony. So please hold your thoughts till the end, and you will have the opportunity at that point. Thank you. So go ahead.
Then I would call Mr. Fahey, please.
Join you here, Honor?
I think we're.
Council, do you open to have everybody sworn at the same time?
That would be great.
Okay,
Probably
why
save
don't
a few
all
minutes.
the
So,
all the professionals and board professionals, why don't we swear you in too, so the record shows that, you wanna get me sworn into it too? Yeah, Martha, let me swear you two at the same time. Swear you in. In case we need testimony from you, okay? Does everybody swear or affirm to tell the truth with respect to the application presently pending before this board?
Yes.
Super. So, Martha, just state your name for the record.
Martha Callahan.
Great, thank you. The board professional. And gentlemen, just state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Steve Lyden, L-Y-D-O-N, professional planner.
Thank you.
David Fahey, F-A-H-E-Y, employee of the Pingree School.
Thank you.
I'm Brad Thompson, professional engineer here on behalf of the Pingree School.
Thank you.
thank you.
Found a pen for you.
Runaway pen. Mr. Fahey, briefly, if you just describe your educational, professional background, your current employment.
Sure. So I graduated from the Pingree School in 1999. I graduated from Boston University in 2003. I graduated from Rutgers University Newark School of Law in 2009. I was admitted to practice law in the state of New Jersey in 2010. I did so for 2 incredibly long years. I'm currently running from the law. I have worked at the Pingree School since 2011 in various capacities. Most recently in this position as the Associate Director of Operations, Safety, and Strategic Initiatives. I've been doing that for 3 years now. I am also currently a member of the soccer coaching staff. I have coached other sports at Pingree, including lacrosse. I have also, at times throughout law school, I was a substitute teacher and part-time employee at Pingree's Short Hills campus, so I spent a fair amount of time there. So those are the basics of my job.
And in connection with your job, you're familiar with the planning process that went into the project before the board?
I am.
Okay, and you are one of the people responsible for implementing it if it's approved by
I
the
am.
board? Okay. And were you also, so you're familiar with the plans?
I am.
correct? And were you also at the September meeting that was held for the neighbors, the informational meeting?
I was.
Present the plans to the neighborhood?
Mhm.
Okay. All right, so let me just ask you briefly, just describe the Short Hills campus as it presently exists, just number of students,
Sure.
staff, just very briefly.
Short Hills campus has 287 students, grades K to 5. We have a typical academic day, approximately 8:30 in the morning till approximately 3:30 in the afternoon. Our students participate in all of the standard academic requirements and classes that you'd expect. We have a very strong belief, both of our campuses, on the idea of sound mind, sound body. So all of our students engage in physical education class. Many of our students also engage in after-school enrichments that are related to athletics, in addition to other pursuits like the arts. And then we have many students that are often on our campus even after-school enrichments with partner programs like Millburn Township baseball. So that's some basics about our school.
Okay. And then there are special events that cause, let's say, larger groups of people to come to campus than a normal school day?
Yeah, so we have approximately 50 employees that are on campus standard throughout the course of the day. But we host 5 to 10 events throughout the course of the year for parents, for grandparents, things like concerts, assemblies. Then another approximately 5 to 10 events throughout the course of the year for admissions. That'll bring large numbers of cars to campus. That often will end up queuing up, all throughout the neighborhood and parking on side streets, and that's certainly not something that we think is ideal for the neighborhood.
Okay. And could you just briefly describe, I know that Pingree as an overall entity has a policy towards environmental stewardship of its properties. Could you just talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, so one of the pillars of our strategic plan from the year 2010 is stewardship and sustainability. And one of the pillars of our current strategic plan, 2018, has to do with place-based learning and education, experiential education. So the school takes the environment very seriously, takes education about the environment very seriously. Students on our Short Hills campus actually spend a fair amount of time outside in nature, both during kind of romp around free time, but also in their science classes. Students on our Basking Ridge campus are doing higher level, research. We actually offer several AP classes that are related to nature, and ecology. We attempt to build projects when possible to LEED or similar standards. We're very, very thoughtful about stewarding both environmental resources and efficiently using economic resources in a stewardship type fashion as well.
Okay. So those considerations go into every plan?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then just again, we'll try to stay brief, but could you first describe the turf field and how and why the school determined to turf this?
Sure. So as a coach, and especially as a coach of young kids, I can tell you that there's kind of no worse experience than telling the kids they can't play that day. So we face this problem on both of our campuses, where the natural grass surfaces, especially in this last season with the tremendous amount of rain that we suffered in the fall, natural grass surfaces will be closed for 3-4 days after one day of heavy rains. In the fall, and then in the spring, natural grass surfaces might not open until school is almost over because of the snow and the freeze and the thaw. So we have turfed 2 of our fields at Basking Ridge, and we are seeking to turf a 3rd there, and we are seeking to turf this field space at Short Hills. And this field, at Short Hills is I'm a soccer guy, so I speak in yards. It's approximately 45 yards wide by approximately 100 yards long, which is not a soccer field. It's a small play space. So, kids of this size, kids of this grade, kids of this age are playing, I'll use soccer as the example, they're playing 4v4 or 7v7. So 7v7 is approximately this size. 4v4 is approximately, you could fit approximately 2 in this size. So we see this as a great space for our PE classes to be able to get outside always, regardless of inclement weather, and for us to be able to use, even despite the bad weather that we face so often now.
I think stated in my intro that no lighting is planned. Is that correct?
No, our teachers don't want to be coaching our kids late at night.
Okay, and there's no spectator
Nope.
facilities at this.
Nope.
Okay.
I don't think you can charge admission to watch kids that age play.
So there's no changes in program, staff, students
No.
proposed in connection with this?
No.
Okay. And could you just talk briefly about the fencing, the 10-foot protective netting around the field? Is that something that's been done at your other athletic fields, and you consider that necessary for safety?
I do. You don't want a 10-year-old going into the creek or the neighbor's backyard or into your parking lot to chase after their soccer or lacrosse ball. They're also not quite that good with their aim. So you want to try to create as much of that walled environment around the playing field as possible. We face similar issues with 15-year-olds on our Basking Ridge campus.
So this field really is an integral part of the school's overall program, and particularly its physical education.
Very much so.
Okay. And then if you would just address parking briefly, describe how the school came to decide that it would like to build this parking lot and how it would be used.
Yeah. So our current parking lot, which has I think about 70 spots, is insufficient. It is insufficient in terms of its size. It is insufficient in terms of its movement. In terms of specifically in terms of our afternoon pickup experience. So we seek to add more parking, more ground cover, more space for cars to queue on our campus, and quite honestly, a safer experience and environment not only for our employees as they leave, but also our kids and their parents as they attempt to come in and come out of the building, get to and from their car, get into their car safely, and manage that experience.
Okay. And this will also function as additional parking for those events you described and sizable crowds.
Correct. When we have Grandparents' Day, we can have 200 cars. That's one day, but we can have 200 cars on campus, or I should say, into the neighborhood outside of campus, and this would certainly help alleviate that.
All right, I have no further questions for Mr. Fahey.
Thank you. We're open to the board for questions for this witness.
I have one question. Given the size of these children, why do you need a 10-foot high fence around the playing field as opposed to a 6-foot high?
Because a small child can still kick a ball 15, 20, 30 feet in the air, perhaps. So the higher the fence within reason, the better to keep the ball into the playing field. They certainly can throw a lacrosse ball, yeah.
I have two questions
Sure.
for you regarding, so you gave testimony there's 287 students. Can you speak to historically, is that trending up or similar to where it's been?
School is actually built to hold 288 students.
Okay.
16 kids per grade, 16 kids per classroom, with 18 classrooms, if my math is correct, and I think it is. So we are actually one shy. We had one student leave. We have no interest in expanding. We've already done that expansion, and that's the size of our student body.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, helpful. And then also with regards to parking spaces and need for parking, is there busing for students?
There is, yeah. So busing in the state of New Jersey is a conundrum. We currently have, that campus is served by 2 buses, and that campus is served by 14 groups of parents that carpool with 4 or more kids, which we kind of treat like mini buses. I can talk a little more about pick up and drop off if you like.
No, that's helpful.
Okay.
I know it tends to be, a cluster.
Yeah.
No matter where, but just I wanted to understand if everybody's arriving via individual vehicles, or thank you for that testimony. Okay. Further questions or comments? Go ahead, Dan.
Are you able to speak to the utility of the field? How often it's going to be used? Is it going to be leased out to others? Is there going to be extended use beyond with respect to the time period than what's used today?
We wouldn't be programming it any more than it already is. We're not adding lights. So the field's hours would continue to be exactly as is and used exactly as it is.
Okay. And that includes the weekends?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Go ahead, sure.
What kind of fencing, what's going to go around here? What do you know, what is it?
The engineer would
The
speak to that.
engineer is probably better to
Yeah.
actually show you that, but it's netting with posts.
What was the reason for doing a separate parking lot rather than onto the existing one?
I would ask the engineer to speak to that. That's his forte, not mine.
Okay, thank you. Opening it to the public for questions for this witness. Or any comments for this witness. Okay, please come up to the microphone and state your name, please.
Sandy Kimmel, 7 Kimmel, Kimmel. Sandy, Sandy, 7 Briarwood Drive. The density of the netting, could the engineer describe what that will look like and whether or not it's going to cut off views?
I'm sure when he.
Yeah, thank you. We'll hold that question for when the density of netting. Thank you. What, I believe, yep, go ahead, come on. That's fine. And then we'll get to you.
Paula Ramos, Paula Ramos, Ramos, 2 Country Day Drive. I would like to understand, compared to the other schools in town, what is the number of students and the number of parking spaces available, so that we can have a basis of comparison. I know, for example, Hartshorn School, where my kids go to, have approximately 400 students. I don't know the exact numbers, but I would be very surprised that they have more than 70 parking spaces in their facility as well.
Understood. I don't know that you can provide testimony to that. Yeah.
But perhaps it would be interesting for the town to understand, because I think every school on pickup times and drop-off times have some sort of traffic involved, and it would be impossible to provide parking to all the individual cars that come.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
My name is James Nitty, last name Nitti. I live at 1 Country Day Drive. Is anybody here on the Millburn Environmental Commission?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a particular bird that lives in Pingree. It's called the red-headed woodpecker. They are protected by the Federal Migratory Bird Act of 1918. They're also protected by the New Jersey Endangered Species Conservation Act. Ripping up the trees for the parking lot, like they said, the side parking lot that they want to do, and expecting the birds to come back is a pretty ambitious thing. The bird continues to be, it's considered threatened. The habitat loss is the biggest threat to the species because they continue to lose their home. They drilled into our house for years, and we have holes on the side of our house. We had to get them filled. They cost how much money? A lot.
Just we're only allowing one
We-
testimony at a time.
We put up big owls to scare them away. We couldn't poison them. We couldn't remove them. We just let them do their thing because they're an endangered species bird. And like I said, removing their home would be against federal law. So.
Madam Chairman,
Go ahead, Joe.
the normal procedure that we have followed in this board is that comments such as these, that are not questions, are held till the end of the hearing.
Yes, I did open it up to comments for this witness. It sounds like
Well,
you're
yeah.
providing general commentary, but yeah, if we can, that's,
Question is, what are they gonna do about the woodpeckers? That's my question. And also the non-permeable surfaces of this new parking lot. How is that going to do with getting the water out? Are you going to put drainage in? How is that going to be? Yeah, that's basically
okay,
it.
it sounds like that's a good question for the engineer, so thank you for providing your questions. I don't know that you have a response on the woodpecker issue at the time. Okay.
Hi, Valerie Wild, 39 Briarwood Drive. I'm a new neighbor, so I did not attend the information session. I had a question about the parking lot, where it's going to be located, and also, are there going to be lights installed as part of installing that parking lot?
Thank you for the question. Do you have
It's
exhibits?
probably better
to
for
that?
the engineer. There are lights that are required by the ordinance that are proposed.
And will you be providing exhibits that
Yes.
she'll be able to see? Okay,
Yeah, there's
so
a
we
lighting
will.
plan
Yeah.
with the levels of lighting, locations, types of lighting. So.
Thank you. Any other questions for this witness? And like I mentioned before, when the engineer and the planner come up, you'll have opportunities to ask those. You can ask them multiple questions as needed.
I have one more question.
Go ahead.
You said that you teach the kids about ecology and the environment. Have you talked to them about the red-headed woodpecker at all?
I am not a teacher. I have not spoken to any kids about the red-headed woodpecker.
But you did mention that, though.
I did mention that, yes,
Okay.
but I can't speak to that speciality of that bird.
Okay, that was my question.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Are you ready to call your next witness?
Yeah, then I would call, thanks, Mr.
Thank you.
Bay. Call Mr. Thompson, please.
Setting this up for the benefit of the neighbors, is it?
Thank you. Yeah, that's fine, and we have copies as well, just to make sure we can all see. Do you want to share if they can? These are the revised.
Okay.
So-
You want to come closer to the bird. I'm not gonna touch that.
It's closer to me than to you.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
so Mr. Thompson, if you could briefly discuss your educational background, qualifications, licensing, and your current employment.
Sure. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. I have a bachelor's of science in civil engineering from Penn State. I have been a professional engineer since 2011, testified in front of many boards in New Jersey.
Could you name a couple?
So, yeah, closest boards are Summit and Watchung. Recently testified at their zoning boards. Also Parsippany, Montclair, just kind of the general area. So.
Okay. And you are one of the professional engineers directly involved in preparing the plans in front of the board?
That is correct. My team prepared these plans.
Okay, so you're fully familiar with them.
I am.
Okay, so I would offer Mr. Thompson as a professional engineer expertise in site planning.
Thank you, we'll hear a message.
Okay.
Okay, so I wonder then if you would just walk the board through the site plan, maybe start with the field, which is, I think, fairly straightforward.
yeah,
And then we'll get to the parking.
That's quite all right. So I have two exhibits that I'd like to mark. The first being just an existing kind of aerial exhibit. I guess this is called C1 is the sheet, dated July 12th, 2018.
That is fine. Do you want that to be labeled in a different?
Yeah.
your-
A1 is that
it's-
fine?
Yes, it's
So
this
are
large.
there black and white versions in the,
There's black and white versions on the cover sheet.
this one's got color.
A little bit larger, kind of format. I would like to mark it. It's not in that set.
Oh, it's not.
Oh,
in
it's not
the
in this set, okay.
So, okay, the numbers will be different than what we have. Thank you. Michelle, good question.
And then what's the other plan you wanted to mark? Might as well do them.
Sure. So the other plan is a colorized rendering of sheet C5 that is in the set. This rendering stated today, January 16th, and it shows the site improvements, the parking lot, and the field.
C5, but it's not
C5
colored.
is just a colored version. So I can mark it with 2.
That'd be great.
So, real quick, I'll keep this brief because I know we all want to look at the next plan. Basically, this is Exhibit A1. North is to the top of the page. Just want to kind of get our bearings here. So, the site is Lot 16, Block 5005 in Millburn, also known as 50 Country Day Drive. On the site is the school itself, which hosts K through 5 grades, and also has a bunch of amenities like athletic fields. There's parking, there's walking paths, that kind of thing associated with the school. It's in the R4 zone and in the C conservation zone, and I tried to highlight on this plan. It bisects the site right down the middle in a north-south direction. Most of the improvements, with the exception of a small portion of the field, are in the R4 zone. The property is located to the southwest corner, of White Oak Ridge Road and Parsonage Hill Road, and kind of extends south into the residential neighborhood. The site is accessed via Country Day Drive, which is on the southwest side of this exhibit, and also there's a driveway on Long Hill Drive, which is to the east of the property highlighted in yellow on this exhibit.
That driveway doesn't access any parking, is that correct?
That is correct. It's really for
Is that more emergency?
yeah, it's more like services for the building, that kind of thing. So, so I will get rid of this exhibit now. So this is Exhibit A2, and again, it's a colorized rendering of the plan that's on sheet C5, the site plan that the board has. This plan shows the existing features as well as the proposed improvements, including the 41 stall parking lot. That's if north is to the top of this page, so it's on the northwest corner of what we're looking at. And we also propose a small guardhouse and basically ADA parking improvements and a sidewalk to get to the proposed 41 stall parking facility. And then the field is off to the east side of the parking. I just kind of highlighted it in green. Really, we're proposing the synthetic turf on the field, and then there is stormwater detention, which I'll get into, which is actually below the field. So one of the big things about this application is its purpose, and really it's to bring the Pingree School further into compliance with the current codes. That was one of the biggest challenges we had with this site. There's very little existing lighting. The ADA parking doesn't meet the ADA code for a number of spaces required. And it's generally the walking paths from the parking needed improvement. So that's kind of what we're working on there. And then also the field itself, as Pingree School testified to, gets less use than they would prefer because of the maintenance and the rain, and it prevents kids from playing on the field. So we're trying to promote safety with the lights and the improvements that we're showing out here with the ADA and the crosswalks and the things that we're showing. And the synthetic turf field has its own benefits for the kids. And as part of the field, we are showing a 10-foot high net, and I can get into that, which basically is on the west, north, and east sides of the field. So I'll come over here and show you where that is. It's basically along the west. So it's on the west side, along the north side, and then it runs along the east side. And that's, again, it's 10 feet tall. The net is black. It's nylon. It's pretty big spacing, so you can see right through it. And it doesn't serve the purpose of like a privacy fence at all. It's really just poles. Those are the primary thing that you see are the actual poles, which will be about 40 or 50 feet apart. So again, not like your normal fence every 8 or 10 feet. And the net is supported via pulleys, so you can take it up and down as necessary. And we chose black as the color just because it would blend in.
And the poles black also?
The poles are also black.
And
yes.
what's the approximate diameter of those poles?
4 inches. So the field surface itself is going to be a synthetic turf, and below the actual surface is a whole kind of strata of sand and material to allow that play surface to be usable. And then below all of that is an underground stormwater detention system that collects all of the runoff from the proposed parking lot. And what happens there is water is conveyed towards the north side of that lot. There are no inlets. What happens is, and part of the environmental stewardship goal on this was to do a little something extra. So what happens is the stormwater runs off into curb cuts that are along that northern curb line into a grass swale. The grass swale provides kind of natural treatment as the stormwater runs through the swale towards the east side. And then there is, about here, like the northeast corner of the parking lot is a flared end section that then accepts that water. And then that water comes into a treatment filter. It's called a CDS unit. It's like a vortechnic unit that pulls all the, well, it's 50% of the solids in the water it pulls out. And then that sends it, once it goes through that unit, it'll go into an underground detention system, which is made up of many rows of pipe underneath the actual field. And we basically get credit for also some more solid removals in that actual detention basin because we are over-detaining, keeping the water there longer to allow particulates to settle out of that water before we then ultimately discharge it back into Taylor Brook.
So there's no water being conducted toward any residential property?
That is correct.
Okay. And this plan meets all of the state stormwater requirements for water quality?
It does, yes. So the parking lot itself, just to go into the parking, just to clarify, there are 71 existing spaces. We're proposing a total of 111 spaces. That's a net increase of 40. We have 41 spaces that are proposed in that lot, and then we lose a space because of the additional ADA that we propose closer to the school to bring it up to code.
Can you show us on there?
Yeah.
What it is?
So this is 41 spaces.
Can you move so we can see?
Sorry? 41 spaces up here. There's 70 spaces down here, including this ADA. And what's happening is the ADA spaces here, because of the additional striping required with ADA spaces, we actually lose a space. There were 8 stalls here, and now there's only 7.
So the new portion.
We're gonna hold questions. I know that she asked, but please just, we will definitely get to all the questions.
So the setbacks associated with the parking are being respected. There's a residential zone buffer of 25 feet. And the closest part of our parking lot is at 25 feet, but then it kind of arcs away, and we're further than that at all spots. And the closest we are is to the rear here and to the side, which is roughly like 28 feet. And in that area where the buffer is, you can see we propose a double or triple row of evergreen plantings. And basically the plantings themselves are white fir and Norway spruce. That's the evergreen part of it. And then we're also providing some ornamental trees, magnolias and viburnum shrubs to help kind of add some color and life into the actual buffer. We are removing 64 trees to put this space in, as well as some of the other trees are being removed as part of in an effort to remove the ash trees that are dying on the site because of the wood-boring beetle that they have out there. So there's 17 trees that are either dead or dying that are being removed, and about 47 trees being removed because of the parking lot. We are adding 127 trees, mixed, Norway spruce, white fir. We have the saucer magnolia and the thunderclad plum, all either evergreen or decorative ornamental trees to kind of help provide a nice natural buffer. And we're providing 60 viburnum to help, again, provide a little bit of color. It's like a flowering shrub that grows pretty big. Basically, the lighting, that's sure, go ahead.
Just while we're on landscaping.
Sure.
Would you, the landscaping plan you proposed, do you consider that in your design experience? Would that buffer adequately the parking lot and, let's say, headlights in the evening if someone's pulling through the parking lot from the adjoining properties?
Yes. Normally, we would, if this were a commercial facility, I know it's not, but if it were, we would put a single row of kind of deciduous shrubs that are short, 4 or 5 feet off the ground, kind of where headlights would spill out. In this instance, we're planting larger species that are designed to grow together, and they grow tall. I mean, we're planting them at 8 or 10 feet, the spruces, basically the evergreens we're planting at 8 to 10 feet, and they can grow, to 40 feet over time, and they grow pretty quickly. I mean, you could get 3 or 4 feet a year out of these trees, so they'll reach a mature height.
So you would feel this is more than adequate screening?
Yeah, it's a pretty heavy buffer. I mean, we don't usually go triple wide, and you can see in a lot of places there where we could, we went with a triple buffer. So.
And there was a comment from one of the township officials about certain of the species. I assume that complying with that would not be an issue with
yeah, the thundercloud plum was an issue. There was an alternate that was suggested that we're happy to use.
So that's not an issue?
No. Okay. So as far as the last thing I just want to mention real quick before we open up the questions is the lighting. We are providing in the existing parking lot, which is down on the south side of the plan, there's going to be 18 light poles with 18 fixtures on them. They're LED lights, so they're very uniform, kind of brand new technology being used in most places now. And they're on 15-foot tall poles, which is the shortest we can make them and still get like emergency vehicles under them. And then on the new parking area, there are 7 lights proposed, and basically there's a double fixtures kind of in this island between the roadway and the parking area, and then there are 3 light fixtures on the north side of the proposed parking. All of the light fixtures have house-side shields on them. The LED technology is pretty interesting because house-side shields used to just be like a baffle that would hang down and kind of block the light bulb. With LEDs, they actually have individual baffles for each LED light, so there's actually many little baffles, and the result is basically when you're looking at that light from standing behind it is you don't see the glare from where the actual light source is coming from. These fixtures are also the lowest intensity fixtures that we could find for a parking application. We tried to balance the number of poles with the light intensity, and we felt we came up with a pretty good balance here. And I think, I'm trying to think here. Yeah, I think that's it.
A couple more questions just
Yeah,
while
sure.
we're on lighting. So the lighting intensities and the height of the fixtures comply with the local ordinance, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So there was no lighting spilling off onto off-site in any way?
No, we basically not only do we not have any light spilling off-site, we don't have any light spilling even onto the 25-foot residential buffer, with the exception of where Country Day Drive, enters the site. Okay. So we tried to be respectful with that.
Okay. So would you consider that the lighting plan you submitted shows lighting intensities in that parking lot that are basically minimum for safety?
We're the short answer is yes. I don't know that there's another way with less fixtures to get less light out there. There are going to be some folks in the audience who had great ideas and actually helped me influence how we ended up here ultimately. But in terms of providing adequate lighting for safety in the parking areas, I don't know how we can get it any lower than what we're showing right now. It's the smallest light fixture the manufacturer makes at the smallest intensity, on the smallest poles we can provide.
And is there lighting also along the sidewalk between the new lot in the school?
Yeah, so part of the 18 poles I mentioned, there are 3 light fixtures that run along the proposed sidewalk. 2 are on the east side, and 1 is on the west side. All of those lights, actually every light on there that can get a house side shield has one. Normally we don't put house side shields, on lights where the backs face the interior of sites, but because we knew lighting was going to be such an issue here, we provided house side shields everywhere we could. So the net result of that, it doesn't matter where you're looking into the site, you won't get that glare like from an exposed bulb.
Then 1 or 2 other questions. I think the zoning officer noted in her memo that the ordinance doesn't currently talk about LED lights, and I just think it hasn't been updated since that's become the standard. So we probably have a design waiver with respect to that.
That is correct.
But
yes.
would you, as an engineer, testify that is becoming more and more in use, and it's actually, in many ways, a superior system to start using the LEDs than some of the earlier types of bulbs that are out there?
Yes, it is. On most of our projects, we're only using LEDs. The only time we ever use like a metal halide is if we're trying to match, an existing lighting situation on a site. So LEDs are the norm. They're also very energy conscientious. They outperform any comparable light with them. And also something not to overlook or understate is the uniformity of LED lights, which is basically, if you're looking at an LED light, how bright is it under the light, and then how bright is it as far away from the light as you can get. Uniformity means it's basically the same or very similar brightness from whether you're standing under the light or whether you're far away from it, and our lighting plan shows that. There's a maximum of, I think it's 2.8 foot candles, which is as low as we could possibly make it. So.
And you've reviewed all the township comments, the fire department, forester, etc.
I have. The only comment I didn't get is from Martha over there. Although we did speak on the phone, and there was one thing I would like to talk about associated with the stormwater. Martha pointed out that on our plans there's a detail that we errantly forgot to put on there, which is how the stormwater discharges into Taylor Brook. We're going to provide conduit outlet protection, which is like riprap stones to prevent, erosion, that kind of thing. So we've designed it. It's mentioned throughout our reports. It's just that the detail isn't on the plan, so we're happy to amend it.
So we will provide that detail.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned, I think we've probably not really talked about this, but there's a small guard shack that has been proposed on the island at the entrance. For security reasons, correct?
Right. So the guard shack, I'll just point it out, is located kind of in the middle of the existing island that's out there. The shack itself is 10 by 12. It's roughly 15 feet tall, and the idea is the shack is something that's contemplated. And we'd like to ask for your approval for it, again, because just with the way the safety is going with schools, they want the ability to construct that if necessary. And the idea is the facade of that building will also kind of blend into the existing facade of the existing.
It would be earth tone. So.
Yeah, it's a stone, basically, base, and then glass. So.
Okay, then I have nothing further for Mr. Thompson.
Okay, thank you. So please, we're going to first hold the audience questions. I know there are probably a number, but first we're going to allow the board, and hopefully some of your questions may also get asked. So,
I have a couple of questions. Looking at the township engineer's memorandum report dated January 16th, and paragraph 4, she asks a question at the end. Will the existing lighting be removed as part of this project?
Yeah, it's just for clarification. I just received the township engineer's letter. I did speak with her on the phone, so I'm equipped to answer these questions. Basically, we are removing the existing lighting within the parking areas and the driveway that are shown on this plan. Yes.
Another question. You mentioned the poles supporting the fencing. Are those poles permanent, meaning if the fencing itself is ratcheted down. Will the poles remain there?
The poles will remain, yeah.
And there are how many of those poles?
We didn't specify a number because a specific manufacturer hasn't been chosen yet. They also need to be designed to withstand wind loads. The net doesn't really have a lot of wind load, so that's why we're anticipating, based on conversations we've had with the manufacturer, about 40 to 50 foot spacing, which, on this field, you may have a dozen poles like all the way around.
And they're approximately 4 inches in diameter?
That's correct, yeah.
What color are they? I'm sorry.
The poles are also black.
Black.
And like a matte black is what we were thinking, not
Final question.
glossy.
You kept talking about ADA parking. That's short for handicap parking?
It is, yes.
I have no further questions.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So about the lighting, you said that you are not asking for a waiver, but on your plans, there is a waiver?
Yeah.
Which I would like to understand why you have that waiver, which is on page C07. And the average light intensity at ground level required by code is between 0.5 to 1 foot candle, and you are proposing 114. Is there any way to avoid this waiver?
You're right, and thank you for clarifying that. This is one of the things we looked at when we were trying to get this lighting the way it needed to be, and the explanation for this is because the LED light is so uniform. Basically, the average level is a little higher than what it would normally be for your traditional light. So, to get it lower than that, we would either have to use taller poles or different style light fixtures, which
or dimmers?
Sorry?
Dimmers?
I'm sorry.
Dimmers.
Dimmer. Oh yes, dimmer. They're the LEDs. For what it's worth, I didn't mention it, but these LEDs are capable of being dimmed, and the idea is we can work out hours that would be dimmed because they don't need to be at full intensity the whole time. So.
Okay. I have another question. Actually, I have a few questions. So you're talking about the fence, and one of the things that you said here, the proposed fencing is designed to blend into the landscape. And I heard many times explaining how the fence is going to look, but I don't see any details on your drawings. Can you provide details of the fencing?
I brought a picture of what the fence manufacturer is kind of provided on their website. If that's something that would satisfy the board, I'm willing to show that to you guys.
Yes,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Let me just grab that. Yeah, I do. It's just in my bag.
And while he's getting that, I know he's the engineer, but I just wanted to ask if there might be somebody who could provide testimony regarding the hours that the lighting is intended to be used. And that may not be the engineers, but I just
Well,
might
we
want
can, we can discuss that easily. I mean, there are ordinance requirements, but the question is, do you want us to do something beyond that? It would depend on what it was in terms of the hours. I mean, there are requirements that be off from, I don't know what the hours are. There's a requirement in the ordinance.
Right, but
Yes.
as you've given testimony that I was just trying to buy you a little bit of time and
Yeah,
ask
sure.
a question as well. But as you've given testimony, there will not be lights on the field, so it's not intended to be used in the evening. The question is about the parking, so we can come back to that. I apologize for getting us off track.
So I just have 11 by, or 8.5 by 11, so I can pass them out.
That's
So
fine.
we'll mark that A3, and can you just give us a description of what that is, please?
Sure. So.
It's a photograph of proposed fencing.
And are these photographs at 10 feet height?
And this is part of the reason I hesitated to show this picture because these are taller than 10 feet, and the spacing of the poles is much closer together. So the idea was I wanted to show that the net is see-through, and this was a pretty good picture. It's a picture from a netting manufacturer called Ball Stoppers, and basically it just shows the board and hopefully the neighbors that it's not it's a transparent thing. It's not intended to block views or anything like that.
Thank you.
I have more questions. So one of the things that I saw somewhere on your application is that the site contains environmental constraints. Which ones are those?
Sure. So, not really part of, I guess, the application, but we do, we got basically a determination from the NJDEP to help us identify the wetlands on site as well as associated buffers, and then also the riparian zone associated with Taylor Brook and the associated buffers. So the wetlands are kind of shown on the, I guess that's the western side, south of the proposed parking lot. This wetland is the largest reason why we didn't just extend the existing. Wooded wetlands are basically sacred and we can't touch them, so the it was kind of a non-starter with the DEP, and we didn't like the idea in terms of environmental stewardship impacting that area, which is why we chose where we did. The riparian zone you can see is kind of along Taylor Brook, showing these black lines. Those are the environmental constraints. One of the permits that we're working on getting involves the placement of the turf field within this corner of the riparian zone. It's already disturbed, the field already exists there. We kind of have preliminary dealings with the DEP and don't see any issue with getting that approved.
Okay, so I guess that the engineer, the town engineer already checked all the flood mitigation here, right? The calculation. Okay. Now about landscaping. So you're saying that you are removing
64 trees.
64 trees, yeah.
I saw on the landscaping plans new trees overlapping old trees. Are
Mhm.
you counting those trees like you are removing because you cannot overlap new and old? So what happened with those trees?
Sure. So on this plan, it's a little misleading because this plan shows existing trees that are over 6 inches in caliper. Oh, sorry, yeah. Okay. So the black dots that are kind of shown throughout the plan are existing trees that are over 6 inches in caliper. That's the size of the trunk a certain way up. And basically, we removed the trees that were in the parking lot, but the idea was we tried to preserve as many of the existing trees as we could and plant close to them with the new trees. We had our landscape architect look at the species. He went out there and cataloged every tree, has pictures, knows the species, and then determined how close he could put the proposed landscaping without, adversely affecting the existing tree. The idea here is most of these existing trees have very tall trunks and don't do much to screen, but they do provide a natural benefit that we wanted to preserve. So we have those tall trees, and then under those tall trees, kind of like as an understory, we have these proposed evergreens and ornamental trees that we're proposing.
Yeah, I'm not really sure if I saw that. I saw something different, two big trees together,
Okay.
one new and one old.
Okay.
So I just, I'm wondering if when you said 70, whatever, 64 trees to remove, if you are really counting all those trees, or if there is some mistakes on the drawing, that at the end, instead to be 64, you are going to be removing whatever, 76, whatever. That's my only concern about having plans that are not very accurate.
Understood. We have a demolition plan in our set that shows every tree that's to be removed. That's sheet 4. The idea here is we did kind of push the envelope of the trees that we're trying to save because obviously we want to save the larger tree specimens that are out there. If there is an actual tree on top of another tree, that's something we can look at if it is an error. But there are trees that are pretty close to each other here. We tried to, again, keep the proper spacing.
Okay. So do you have a memo from the forestry?
Yes, it's in.
Because from what I saw here, there are many plants that are not native here. Like when you said magnolia, actually it's a Chinese magnolia. And I don't see, except the red maple, I don't see so many native plants. I'm not an expert on plants, so I didn't read this memo. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like the plant.
So, I mean, we're willing to work with the township arborist on species. Like I said, the thundercloud plum is something we're willing to replace for a site-specific issue, and we're happy to hear about that. If there are other recommended plantings out here that would be recommended by the arborist, we're happy to oblige. Again, we were trying to provide plants that we know will do well out here, considering the wet environment, and then also provide something that's nice to look at. That was the two goals. So.
Okay.
Thank you. Mark?
You mentioned a little bit about the stormwater detention capacity. What is that? Like how many inches per 24-hour storm are you going to kind of capture?
Sure. So the basin and basically the way we designed the rainfall landing on the parking lot, and then the way it captures in the basin is it meets DEP requirements for reduction, peak flow reduction. Yeah, they're in the process of changing that, but right now we're still using the old regs. I know there was talkings. We received a memo again in 2019. There was in January. I know they're changing some things, but basically we're reducing peak flow for the 2-year storm by 50%, for the 10-year storm by 75%, and for the 100-year storm by 80%. And what that means is the water leaving the site is going to be flowing at a lower intensity than what it is today. And that's what the basin does. It holds that water back so that we discharge it slower. And that's the criteria we're meeting.
And you mentioned that you're using geotechnic systems, and
Yes.
you've got to maintain that like every 6 months.
Yes. Right. So part of our application that we have an operations and maintenance manual. We've also talked with the Pingree School about using this system. They're aware of what it is and the maintenance required. They have on-site maintenance staff that will be able to maintain it. Yeah.
You also mentioned, at least in the stormwater management plan, you're going to try to retain it on site as much stormwater as possible. Again,
Right.
You'll be releasing a lot of it into the brook.
Right.
What are you estimating, say, for a 2-inch storm, what that release would be?
I don't know that number offhand, but I can grab it in the report if you can.
Just because it's, yeah, and it's just sort of interesting. It'd be great to keep that,
Yeah, so the interesting thing with stormwater is sometimes when we look at stormwater, it's not only how much we're putting into the brook, but it's also how much we're taking out. Balancing watersheds is a big part of what we do. So while removing stormwater sounds nice, if you remove too much of it, you could affect habitat and just the way the river behaves and performs. So the idea behind that is we're trying to balance that by holding water back as much as possible. In this instance, the basin we designed actually holds the 2-year storm back more than it needs to. Again, that gives us a little bit of cleaning action, also helps us with the reduction. If you want that 2-year number, I can get it if that's meaningful to you. Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, Cheryl, and then.
I think the engineer asked another question, whether you can verify that the specified landscape plantings are considered drought tolerant?
Again, I haven't had a chance to review that letter, but they are drought tolerant. Basically, the species we provide, we call it kind of zero-scape. Like they don't require irrigation in this climate, and are able to go, periods without water, but then are also capable of being inundated with water. That's part of the reason why we chose the species. So we can look at that.
Okay, we'll go. Gaston, do you have your question?
Just a question about the storage. I know you said there's still some type of sediment reduction once it goes into the storage system.
Mm-hmm.
That's easily cleaned out as well, because it looks like a huge storage system, and I don't know, what else makes it in there, but how do they clean that out?
Yeah, so the storage system, and it doesn't show on this rendering, but for the benefit of the public here, the storage system is kind of under the western half of the field. It's made up of rows of pipe. Each row of pipe on either end of it has like a little access port that you can basically put in a cleaning device. They jet it out and clean it. The maintenance on that is a little less intense than the Vortechnic unit. Every year or so it needs to be inspected and probably cleaned, every year as well. But again, that's kind of in our maintenance plan.
And that sediment then is captured as well? It doesn't go directly into the stream or the brook, or how does it?
It kind of settles out in that basin, and it's not a lot, but it will accumulate over time, so it needs to be maintained so that it's not discharging.
And it's not going into the brook.
Right, exactly. So.
I wanted to ask about the wetland and the stream, if you have any plantings that discourage the Canada geese?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know that that's a problem on this site. It might be. I'm not familiar with it, but I know the plantings that we have are. It's a pretty wooded area, so where we're working, we're providing many trees. I don't think it's going to be like a landing pad for geese.
It's not a problem, then that's good.
Yeah. So.
In Berners Township, we have a dog. A border collie that chases it.
Okay, Joe.
I'm looking at Mr. Doty, the town forester's report of December 11, 2018. Will you address paragraph 2, where he talks about the deer?
The deer, right? Yeah.
You haven't said anything about that.
So the species that we're planting, we will have to be careful of deer, and we're willing to, comply with this, either come up with a deer repellent program or, provide some type of temporary fencing to keep that. Considering the proximity to the neighbors, we'll probably have to come up with some type of, environmentally.
But you haven't engineered that yet?
We have not engineered that yet, no. We just received this today, so we're happy to look at it.
No, this is dated December the 11th.
We received it today.
Pardon me?
So.
We did not receive it.
So we're happy to look at that and help. Obviously, we want these plants to last and survive the deer. So.
And you prepared the environmental impact statement as well?
Someone on my team did, yes.
Great. So I just wanted to ask the question because it speaks to wildlife and vegetation and mentions that that there's no short-term impacts no long-term impacts, reversible impacts, or irreversible impacts. So we heard a question earlier, so I just want to head it off and ask regarding the woodpecker,
sure,
or any other species, because your document is silent on that. So I just wanted to go back and
yeah, our document is silent on that. As part of our process with the NJDEP, we're required to get a review from a group called the Natural Heritage Agency, which basically determines for this area which environmental species may be sensitive to development, and then tells us whether we need to do anything special for those species. In this instance, the woodpecker didn't come up. We're happy to look at what we might be able to do to help mitigate, but it's not something that the DEP was going to make us do anything different on these plans to protect.
So it's not on the DEP list.
No.
Basically, is what you're saying, that it doesn't appear. Okay.
Not for this specific site. The natural heritage is interesting because it's
Right.
site specific. Yeah. So for this specific site, they're saying it's not for that or any other species a viable habitat for those birds or other endangered species. So.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Mark, and I may open it up to
Sure.
the public who has a question regarding that specific.
Is threatened. It is. Yes, threatened, which doesn't offer.
Okay, but if it's not, it's not on the
It's.
list.
So and I'm anxious to hear more about it. That list, I just want to clarify, does include threatened and endangered species. It's both. So they don't recognize everything, and obviously for this site, they're not going to recognize everything. So if it is something that we should look at, we're happy to look at it. So.
Okay, thank you. And when it's public questions, if you have a further question, not at the moment, but we will allow you to entertain that. Go ahead, Dan.
I want to be clear here. We didn't hear any testimony on the environmental impact statement, but are you in the position to answer questions on the environmental impact statement, since we haven't heard any discussion as of yet? We've heard discussion on the plans, on the drainage, on the site aspects, but nothing on the environmental impact statement. So should we wait until we hear a specific testimony on the environmental impact statement before we ask questions?
Yeah, I can answer questions on it. I reviewed it. I worked with the person who wrote it.
I know Michelle, but so you're in the position to answer questions then?
I am. We weren't going to provide direct testimony on the environmental impact statement because the information we received back from the agencies we reached out to was that there were no environmental impacts. That's why I don't have any testimony. So I'm happy to provide any questions.
All right, so then allow me to ask you one question. Our environmental impact statement guidelines require that there is a disclosure of any construction-related and long-term environmental impacts. In reading the environmental impact statement, I saw no discussion of noise. And the reason why I bring that up is because you're locating a new source of noise with that parking lot within a relatively short distance of the backyard of sensitive receptors, the residential uses. So I was just wondering why there was no disclosure or discussion of any potential noise impacts or no noise impacts when you're locating a noise generator significantly closer to a noise receptor by putting that parking lot just north of the roadway. People will be parking, starting their cars, backing out. It's an entirely new noise source that's located significantly closer to sensitive receptors, the residential development along that side of the property. So if you feel that you're in a position to answer that question, that's fine.
Well, I'll let the board be the judge. I can provide some testimony to that. I'm not a noise expert, but I know enough about the noise to answer your question, sir, if that's okay.
Sure.
Basically, at the residential property lines, the requirement is 65 decibels during the day, 55 at night. We are outside of the residential buffer that's been stipulated by your zoning ordinance for parking or any other improvements really, and the cars themselves, in my experience, are not significant enough noise generators to cross that 65 decibel threshold during the day and 55 at night. It's not something that we trigger, we need to do a noise study on this. If there were large trucks out there or a generator, that kind of thing, but cars are generally designed to not exceed that noise level. For what it's worth, I mean, there's cars in every one of those residential properties as well. I mean, it's not something that's going to be obtrusive or any different to what's happening on the site currently.
No. But you're talking about one particular. I appreciate that. You're talking about one particular car, but what you're providing here is parking for 40 some odd cars, and you're going to have probably constant turnover of those cars. So you're going to have a lot of activity. So you're going to have a lot of cars being started. We're going to have a lot of cars backing up, and in start mode generates more noise than in rolling mode. And again, I appreciate your experience, but again, there's nothing in this document that allows me to feel comfortable that we're not creating a potential noise issue by also locating the noise source significantly closer to the residential property. I think we're within about 25 feet of the one property at the corner, and maybe 75 feet at the most. So I would have felt better if there was at least some documentation and discussion in the environmental impact statement which states that any potential impact should be discussed or disclosed, but there was nothing in here on noise. You did give me general air quality, and we recognize air quality is not an issue, but
right.
But when you're, it just seems to me that it should have been something that should have been at least evaluated or assessed, irrespective of the fact that it generates an impact or not. There's nothing in here that relates to that.
Okay, understood. Our report does omit it, again, because we feel it will not be an issue. It's up to the board how you'd like to, whether you'd like to make that a condition, Roger.
Yeah, and I think also that the fact that this parking lot complies with the setback requirements of the ordinance. township felt otherwise, that these were noise generators that need to be farther away, the ordinance would be different. So we've complied with that.
Understood,
And-
right.
And buffered it. And buffered it. And also, while I'm thinking of it, 9 PM lights off,
Thank you.
6 AM lights on. That would be our proposal, before I forget.
And is that documented anywhere that I missed?
No,
or- okay.
I'll put that on the record. We certainly would accept that as a condition of approval. And that's more constrained than the ordinance.
And is that year-round or just during the school year?
Good question. Year-round? Probably, yeah.
Although probably in the summertime it's light at those times anyway.
Well,
Okay.
if the sun gets rise at 5:30, then we won't need them.
Yeah. Thank you for providing that
Okay.
testimony as well. Okay, great. Additional questions from the board?
I just have a question for council. Has this picture been marked
A3,
as an
yeah.
exhibit?
It's A3, yes.
Yeah, I was just one more question on, since I heard at the beginning that this school is, they based on environment and they want to be green, why you didn't consider to use a pervious pavement here instead to use an impervious pavement?
That's a good question. Pervious pavement, in our experience, is a good idea, and it holds up for about 5 years. And then what happens is, once you salt and go through a couple of winters, the pervious pavement tends to clog and then become impervious pavement. And the process of cleaning pervious pavement gets a little complicated, basically, and the actual process of cleaning it could end up needing to repair it. And what we see is, when there's a freeze-thaw cycles in areas of damaged pervious pavement, what happens is you get kind of an uneven surface that becomes like a trip and fall type situation that we try to avoid. I'm for pervious pavement in certain applications, but when you have traffic like this, where you're going to have people walking on that, young kids and stuff, it's something that we're trying to avoid in this instance.
Thank you. Additional questions from the board? Okay, we are going to open it up to the public for questions. Again, one person at a time. Please come up to the microphone and again state your name for the record.
Steve Nitti, N-I-T-T-I. I just want to let you know where I live, right here. So I've lived there since 2003, so I've seen everything in the Pingree probably better than they do. The first question I have is that just over the last 3 years, Pingree opened up its fields to outside teams. So all during the weekend, you have teams from Newark, Connecticut, lacrosse, soccer, whatever, coming in and out all day long. And I'm just wondering, are you doing all this repairs to make money? Do you get a fee for that? Do you get paid for that, or you do that for free?
He can't address that, but Mr. Fahey can address that.
Do I come back up?
Sure.
Yeah.
You're still sworn.
So we have a couple partners that we work with. The Township of Millburn rents our baseball field. I believe they pay us about $1 a year. And then we work with two Millburn-based clubs, one in soccer called Soccer for Life, and then one for lacrosse. I think it might be called Girls on the Run or something, that we do rent our fields to. They use them, again, the fields are not lit, so that they might use the field on a spring night from 4:30 till 6, and they might use the field on a summer night until 7:30 or 8. So that wouldn't intensify. There's no change.
So, but you do get paid by these clubs?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, so you make money from that. And they'd be using that parking lot as part of generating more money for Pingree then?
No, it's just a source of revenue so that we don't have to continue to increase tuition rates.
Okay.
Yeah.
You are making money from it.
We are generating revenue, yeah.
The second question I have.
Stay here. Yeah. I should stay here? No, I'm asking you, should I stay?
No.
Oh, okay.
I have another question.
Is it for me?
No.
Sorry.
I'm just wondering too, is that I've been since '03, and there was never any lights in Pingree up until 2 years ago. They put one light in the parking lot here, one light 2 years ago, and all of a sudden they want to put 150 lights there, and I live here, and my neighbor lives here. I mean, I'm just wondering why all of a sudden all these lights. My third question is,
Would you like somebody to answer that?
Yeah, why don't they address that question?
Well, I would just say there was a time that we didn't background check teachers either before we had hired them. So there's a tremendous amount of safety and security efforts that are now in place.
Okay, as an address to that question.
And last question, why do you have to put up a guard station there when there's never been one incident at Pingree? Now, I've been there since '03, and I've never seen any, the only time I see a policeman there is just sitting there drinking coffee during the day and just driving back. He does it every day. So I'm just wondering why we have to have a guard station there, you know, right here to really, you know, put a pimple on the neighborhood. I just don't understand that. So could you answer that?
Well, I can answer that.
Okay, good.
One incident's one incident too many. And I think that if you know, I mean, we can all think about what's happened at schools around this country. So security is always important, and it's something that we're looking at. We said we may or may not build the guard station. We'd like to get it approved. The thought being that if we are able to build the parking lot, we'll see how it operates, we'll see whether we need it, or it's something that, you know, the security world is heading towards. But we're doing it now rather than come in later with an application just to build an 8x10 building and take everybody's time up. So the answer is, it's for security purposes, and the fact that nothing's ever happened there is great. But that doesn't mean.
But you're not going
that
to check
we
every car
can't.
coming in, though.
Well, I don't know what we're going to end
Okay.
up doing. It's possible.
The last thing is that, are you aware that the wildlife there are 2 hawks, and there's a family of foxes there, and they feed on the rodents and squirrels all year long. So I see them all the time. In 2000, I think before your predecessor, I helped him carry off a dead hawk because he smashed into the window at Pingree. Beautiful bird. So I think, you know, that's something to be considered too.
Appreciate it, thank you. Yes.
Just to, I don't know if we want an answer on that lighting question.
That last was a comment, I think,
Okay,
more than a
okay.
question, but if you had a response.
I just wanted to clarify, there's 28 fixtures, 25 poles, not 150, that's all.
Okay, that's fair, thank you.
Okay.
Sandy Kimmel, I live in the house right over here, and the concern I have is lighting and whether there'll be a glare shining into my bedroom windows. So 2 concerns.
Questions?
Yeah, there are going to be questions. Can you confirm that there is going to be a timer on the lighting so it will go off at a reasonable hour in the evening?
We just received testimony saying 9 PM. I didn't know
9
if you
p.m.,
heard that.
okay. Second thing is,
It was a presentation, I guess, it wasn't testimony, but.
But it's our
Presented
undertaking,
as-
and we would agree to a condition to that effect.
okay.
Thank you.
Also, the baffling, is it adjustable so that if there's a complaint from a neighbor that a particular light is causing glare out to the side, that can be fixed?
Can the lighting be adjusted is the question.
Sure, so the fixture itself can't be rotated, it wouldn't change much anyway, but there are 2 baffles. Basically, we're going to put the one baffle in that prevents you know, each little LED from shining. There is the larger, older baffle that you can hang down. If there is a need for it out there, we can put it to do a full cutoff. Right now, our study is showing that there is not. But you know, if there is an issue with it, it's easily retrofitted.
Okay. And finally, last question.
Okay.
Concern about the height of the pole versus the height of the trees. I've heard that the trees, at least initially, will be 8 feet max, but the poles are 15 feet, so upper bedrooms are not going to be shielded from light flow, unless the baffling will do it. So the question is it possible to build higher? I know it's going to take several years to grow in, but until such time, we could have glare into the bedroom.
Sure, so these lights are, they're not like decorative fixtures that shine in all directions. They're what we call full cutoff light. So nothing above the 90-degree plane, there's 0 light above 90 degrees. So the light itself shines all its light down. There won't be any light shining up. I don't know.
But it will go residually, or?
It goes residually, but as I've testified to before, it stops before the property line.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, sir, here, this one up.
Hi, I'm Doug Wild. We live at 39 Briarwood. I just had a couple observations. So we just moved in, like 2.5, 3 months ago. My wife Valerie and I moved from Stewart Road, just down the street. And our concern is that we live effectively here. And at night, has everybody seen Field of Dreams? Where you see in this field in Iowa, this like big illuminated baseball field. That's what this looks like. Just with the 2 or 3 lights that are there now. My concern is for my neighbors.
Just make sure you're asking a question.
What's that?
A question at this time?
I mean, this is a question and a statement.
Okay.
But one is, if you're going to put more lighting in here, it's really going to compromise the tranquility of our property, because you're going to see, from basically, 4:30 during the winter months, until 9 o'clock, you're going to see this big illuminated space with all the leaves are down now. And my concern is that you've got, another parking lot going here. You've got another field of trees going in here. And what's it going to mean for these people? You got no buffer here, so this is going to all be illuminated. And then the folks on White Oak Ridge, they've got a busy street. And your comments about noise and tranquility, is it Daniel? I think that's a really salient point, because they've got a lot of street noise, and the tranquility of their backyards could potentially be compromised if you've got this parking situation. And the other thing is, I really think, I don't know why you need all this parking. I guess it came to life in your comments earlier about the weekend athletic activities. Why do you need this much parking for a K-5 school? The kids, it's not like high school. The kids are driving to school and parking spots. So I just don't understand the necessity of this, and then also how it's going to compromise, these people right on White Oak Ridge, and then the first few homes on Briarwood. And then my last observation is, and I don't know whether you can do this or not, is you've got these big 10 or 15-foot poles supporting these nets. And is there a way, and I understand the need for it, because kids are going to be apparently throwing balls and kicking soccer balls and kicking darts and whatnot. But is there a way to telescopically create poles that you could, when you drop the nets, you could also drop the poles, so you wouldn't have an unsightly picture for these folks on White Oak Ridge. So those are my observations, and just having lived there now for 3 months, you've got this situation in this parking lot that it really, it's a bummer at night. It really is. I just don't know how to say it, but that is what it is.
Okay, thank you. So I heard a couple questions in there. Are you able to respond to the questions regarding telescopic lighting and just the need for lighting and parking?
Right, so the lighting provided, again, is the minimum to provide a safe environment within the parking lot. I do want to point out, I didn't say it specifically, but there's another row of new evergreen plantings on the west side of the existing parking lot that are not required by any ordinance or anything, but again, we were sensitive to the fact that these new lights were there, and most of the existing trees are tall and don't provide a lot of blocking of the light. So we provide that double and triple buffer there to again help alleviate viewing of the light from neighboring properties. The telescopic poles is interesting. I haven't seen it done before. I know the poles have to withstand certain wind loads, and that's going to be the primary factor. I'm not aware of a product that can then telescopically go in and out, or poles of that height to be removed. Basically, the pole would have to be almost as far in the ground as it is sticking up. So it would become difficult to have something that could come out temporarily and be put back in. So I don't know that it's feasible. It's an interesting thought, though.
Okay. Thank you. Did he address your questions? Okay. Thank you. Any additional questions?
I know it's late. It's 9 o'clock. I didn't know we were going. I'm sorry. My name is James Nitty, last name Nitti. What do you define as a wetlands?
Wetlands are defined by three things. Basically, you need to have hydric soils, species that are, wet, and plantings basically that live in wetlands. So there's three criteria that define them.
So it has to be wet and watery, correct? And it has to be a specific ecosystem which animals live there.
Not necessarily, but go ahead.
So I've lived here since 2003, like everybody, and my neighbors here have lived here too. This area is completely dead. There's no water. I don't think it's flooded once since I've lived here. Once. This is not a wetlands, and nothing in this would be defined as a wetlands. I invite everybody to come down and go see it yourselves, and you'll just see a bunch of dead woods. And second, nothing was addressed about the drop-off pickup and how this planning improves the drop-off pickup. Are you gonna make people park here and then make children walk up here while cars are driving up? That just doesn't seem very safe or smart to me. Nothing in this plan widens or helps improve cars coming in, down, and picking up their children and going out. So I was just wondering if you guys considered that in your plan at all.
We have. So to take your questions one at a time, the wetlands, believe me, myself and Pingree would love if the DEP did not consider that wetlands, because that's where we'd put that parking lot. But they do. We went and we flagged, had a wetland specialist go out and flag where she thought wetlands were. We had the DEP come out to the site and verify. They moved some of our flags around and basically confirm that they think that those are wetlands. So while I agree with you, it stinks that they call that wetlands. They do, and I can't do anything about it.
And then pickup drop-off?
So pickup drop-off, this doesn't have a direct impact to pickup drop-off, because the way that works is cars come in, they circulate. Most of the picking up and dropping off is happening right at the front door of the school. The idea is to continue to keep it that way. It's my understanding that the big disruption to the pickup drop-off thing is if someone has to get out of their car or walk their child into the school or something like that. And providing, right now there's nowhere to allow that to happen. The lot that's existing is mostly full, and when parents come in, there's nowhere to kind of, if they're not just dropping off and driving away, there's nowhere for them to park and then walk their child in. So for parents that are dropping off that need to walk their child in, that extra parking lot provides that, and they'd be walking with their parent kind of along that proposed sidewalk that we show on the eastern side of the road there.
So they wouldn't have to cross the driveway?
Yeah, the idea is that no kids have to cross that at all. That was specifically designed that way. And just lastly, you mentioned not widening any of the roads. We purposely did that. We don't want to intensify the use. We're trying to keep this a nice, quaint, small road, and I know it's serving a pretty active use, but I think it does a good job, and with these improvements it'll do better.
So the issue of pickup drop-off isn't really addressed unless it's the parking lot and the kids walking up there, correct?
I mean, yeah, go ahead if you have more to add.
So we notice that people begin queuing up down Briarwood, down Country Day Drive, as early as 2:30, 2:45 for 3 o'clock, 3:15, 3:30 pickup drop-off. What we hope, one of the benefits that this might allow would be to bring more people onto campus, such that our drop-off line, our pickup line is quite efficient. Our parents don't get out of the cars. Generally, they come through. We have 5 staging areas that we send kids to from the building. By doing this, if we're able to pull more parents off of the road, out of the driveway, into this parking lot as a staging point, and then pull their cars out, so that we shorten the lines and hopefully make it more efficient.
Nothing further?
Okay. Additional questions from the public? Okay, great.
Neil Ehrman, and I live at 1 Briarwood Drive.
Can you spell it?
E-R-M-A-N. So I live. I'm over here. So I'll have the view of all 1, 2, 3, 12 lights here, whatever you have over here. The question I have is, right now you have how many spots here?
There's 71.
71.
Including the ADA, but yeah, 71.
So this is more than Hartshorn School, right here.
I'm not able to.
Hartshorn has about 68 spots, maybe 69.
No, I don't know that.
Okay.
Sure.
That's what they did.
Uh-huh.
And now you're gonna add another 40. And how many kids go to the school?
287.
And how many are in Hartshorn?
400.
400? So I'm just a little concerned why you would need to have such a large spot here. And, you know, if you're there at night and you see a 15-foot, I mean, 15 feet is higher than the ceiling here, right? You're gonna have double head LED with a 4,000 temperature. 4,000 temperature on a light bulb is what you would use in an operating room, just to give you a little perspective. Yes?
I would agree that it's the same color because it's a white light, but it's not the same intensity. That's the color temperature of the light. So.
Well, you're also showing a 2.8 foot candle.
Right.
Right. And the ordinance is a half a foot, did you say?
Well, average on ground is between 0.5 to 1.
0.5 to 1. So I understand that if you want to use a 4,000, you got to get at least to 15 or 20 foot tall to get to that foot candle. Can't you look at a different design where you're not upsetting all these trees here and come in and maybe widen this driveway here, just like in Millburn? I mean, we all park parallel, everyone's pretty good at it in town. And you can use little LED bollards that are there, and it would be a nice path. I mean, you'd have it all lit up, but you'd see no light pollution or halo effect from the existing lights.
Right, so I appreciate the thought of having parallel parking along the existing drive. It's a good observation because it's actually one of the first things we considered was
I
doing
mean,
that.
you'll get 30 spots there.
The issue with it, my concern is with the amount of cars that we have coming to drop people off, when we have a use like that, we try not to put parking directly off of the main drive aisle that those people are using to make the drop off and pick up happen, because then you have cars interacting with each other, trying to get out of spaces and that kind of thing. That's going to cause backups, delays, and God forbid, accidents. So, trying to prevent that from happening. Again, the kind of having parking on the outside is just while it's an interesting thought, it's not the safest solution, which is why we went with this.
Yeah, I just have a tough time with the whole idea of the parking lot here because I don't know if you have kids or do drop-off. I do it.
I do.
And I can tell you, if I'm dropping off a kid, there's no way I'm going to go park to go pick up the kid to drive around in a circle to pick him up on the fly.
I'm sorry, say that again.
So if I'm dropping off,
Is that a
if I'm
question?
if I'm dropping off my kid,
Thank you.
I am not gonna go here and park, get out of my car, walk, go get him, and then come all the way back to the car to get out just because I saw some open spots here. I would sit in line and drive around like everyone else does and go around and get by number 1, number 2, number 3, pick up my kid, and then drive out.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, they'll wait if they're.
I believe the testimony was, more like a cell phone lot, like waiting there and then going versus queuing on the residential streets. I believe that's what the difference.
Well, I don't think, no, because I don't think 30 spots is gonna do a difference. It's not gonna have a bit of difference to pull them off the street.
Okay, well, I just wanted to clarify the point that was made. After he's completed, then I'll invite you up.
And one other thing is, I know we were talking about sound and decibels. Do you know, can you give me an example of what a 60 dB sound would be?
I know, like transformers have to comply with that, like that you see like on the side of the road, sometimes a bit of buzzing or something like that. That's.
How about a basic conversation that we're having right now?
I'm not willing. I don't know enough to know.
The conversations are exempt from the noise control.
I think he's just trying to get a baseline of what's a decibel.
So
a refrigerator is 60 dBs.
I understand.
It depends on how big of a refrigerator. It's a hard conversation to have because it depends on the unit. There are units. I can install a generator there that would comply with it if I have the right
I'm
output.
telling you that 60 dBs is a typical conversation, a refrigerator.
Sure.
So when you're telling me that 30, 40 cars parking in here next to my neighbor's house, I think you're going to break that 60 dB sound level.
I respectfully disagree, but
Well, we should bring the sound expert.
Okay, right, because you don't have any
I have no
providing
reference.
testimony on site, but, okay. Thank you. You had a question. Come on up, just state your name again, please.
Paula Ramos, Ramos. If I understand correctly, then the purpose of the parking lot is actually to alleviate the traffic that parents go through and impact us neighbors during pickup and drop off, right? There is no plans to have more use of the school or more events and none of that, right? The purpose, did I understand that correctly?
Well, I think that there was two things. I mean, certainly there's a benefit to pick up and drop off, with creating a waiting area or maybe a queuing area. But also it was for the times that there are special events at the school, you know, that Mr. Fahey testified about, where there are sometimes several hundred people come to those, that would provide some overflow parking, alleviate some of the street parking. So those are really the two areas
And
that are
those-
being addressed, but there's no more kids, no more staff, no new programs, none of that.
No weekend activities.
Not beyond what's there now.
Okay. So if that's the case, I would understand, or at least I would imply, that the key people who are today impacted by the flow of cars are the neighbors. So I wonder if it wouldn't be appropriate to ask the people involved in the community whose noise levels and light levels and even the look and feel and potentially even the value of our properties, if we wouldn't rather stay with what we currently have, which is in the morning around 7:30, 8 o'clock, and then in the afternoon between 2:30 and 3:30, if we wouldn't rather stay with the flow in which we are used to and we many times bought our property knowing that would be the case, rather than have a significant disruption in the environment we're in a parking lot that will basically, what you're telling me, is going to be used 5 to 20 nights a year when there are big events at the school, or every day as to control the flow that you have from pickup and drop off. And I agree that 40 spots for approximately 300 cars, if I do the math of who comes from the 2 buses and the 14 cars that I believe you say carpool, 40 cars will not make a big difference. And what I hear from my neighbors is that a parking lot with potential noise, a lot of light, will be a much bigger disruption. So I wonder for the board if the community shouldn't be heard about the choices around those disruptions, if we wouldn't rather have the traffic that we already have, or if we rather have the presence of a potentially commercial-looking parking lot in our neighborhood. That would be my question.
This is that opportunity. Thank you for providing
Can I
that.
actually ask one more question?
Yes, you may.
Can I
Yeah.
ask a question? Okay. So I'm putting a couple pieces together. And so I wanted to piggyback on, I think, the gentleman here who had suggested probably parallel parking. Is that you?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're saying that the primary use, as this woman just said, is going to be, and as you stated earlier, using this overflow parking for special events, either assemblies or grandparents' days, you mentioned, not the kind of regular traffic flow for the school, could you not put spots along that road and just have them restricted by hours so that you can't park there during drop-off pickup time, but you could park in those parallel spots for special events, for concerts, or whatever's going on at the school? But that way you wouldn't have the interaction that you mentioned being concerned about.
Sure. So part of the thing that makes this pickup drop-off work is also the relative size of that driveway going to the school. It's two-way for a point, but then it becomes one-way, and it's pretty narrow, and we call that in our industry, it's like a traffic calming effect that basically slows people down. And the idea of adding parallel parking spaces there that won't be used kind of gives you this wider berth of pavement, and what we find is when people have wider, pavement and more room to move around, they tend to go faster. So that was actually one of the largest reasons why we decided not to do that. The second largest was having kids, open car doors into cars. That was the second thing. So.
Please.
So that was a lot of thought was put into it. Those were two of the largest things. The only other one that wasn't mentioned is just the grading associated with it. The way that topography falls on the site, that side that we would put the parking on is lower, which would only exacerbate the problem of, having it be at a bad spot, basically, because cars will tend to veer that way if people aren't paying attention on their phones, that kind of thing. And also water is going to flow that way, and you could get ice and that kind of thing along that curb. So that's why we decided to have the dedicated sidewalk on an elevated curb so that the interaction of water, ice, cars, all that was alleviated. So.
May I ask a question?
You may, and then, next is one from.
Is the current parking lot 100% capacity currently during the day with faculty?
No.
It's not?
No.
Okay. When there is overflow into the neighborhood, have there been complaints to the police department that have caused issues that you know of? Yes? No, I'm seeing...
Never.
No, not once.
May I ask the gentleman who works for the school?
We could swear another witness.
Okay, please.
No.
This is Ted Corvino, who's the head of the lower school.
Okay, Mr. Covino, do you swear to tell the truth with respect to the application presently pending before this board?
I do.
Good, and would you just spell your last name?
My last name? Sure. Corvino, Corvino.
Thank you.
And how long have you been at the lower school, Mr. Corvino?
I've worked at the lower school. This is my 45th year at the lower school as a teacher and administrator.
Okay.
The question about the overflow parking on the local streets, I'm the one that receives the phone calls. I get the phone calls. I had a conversation with Millburn Police about parking on the street probably a year and a half ago, where a neighbor on Long Hill was upset that we were asking our faculty to park on Long Hill so that the visitors could come in for events, feeling we would park on one side of Long Hill would make life easier for the neighbors. A neighbor was upset that we were blocking the sidewalk coming out, and I reached out to the police officer who works with us, Officer Del Fuente, and he and the person on the desk confirmed that parking is allowed on the street unless there are specific signs restricting parking. I spoke to the neighbor. She was still quite upset. I told her that we would do our best to try to park as many cars as we could on our lot. Faculty volunteered to park on the grass. That works when the ground's frozen, but it didn't work whenever it's wet and it's major damage. And for visitors and teachers with heels on their shoes, it was a major catastrophe too. But I have personally spoken to neighbors about the amount of parking, because we do have several events that we bring in grandparents or parents for evening back to school night, and it's more than the normal amount of spaces are required.
How many times a year?
It's hard to say. We have specific things. We also have admissions events because we do have to attract.
Are those in the evening?
Occasionally, most of them we've moved to daytime, but we'll occasionally have one in the evening.
How many?
I would say this year probably 2 or 3 in the evening, maybe 2.
How many during the day?
Another 4 or 5.
So we're talking about 7 times a year?
For admissions, yeah.
For admissions,
Yeah.
7 times a year, and how many with grandparents or parents?
Grandparents is another one. Parents would be at least one more. We have 2 concerts that attract a large number of parents also during the school year. Not to mention, we have 2 parent days where school is closed, the faculty's there, but parents come in to park, and we'll have every teacher has 16 students in the class, so that day is pretty much filled with half-hour conferences. So you'll have that many people also trying to find parking spaces on site.
In and out, right?
In and out after, depending if you have a couple of kids, you're there an hour and a half at a time. If not, you're there 40 minutes, 30 minutes.
And
Yes.
this new parking lot will completely alleviate any of the street parking?
No,
Or just some of it? What portion of it will it alleviate, you think?
It's hard for me to say. I don't know how much it would eliminate. The number of cars that would be in the lot would certainly then not be on the road. So it would eliminate those cars, that number of cars that are in the lot.
40 out of the 287 or so, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we have a lot of families that have multiple kids in the school too, so.
Okay.
Thank
That
you.
answered your question. So we're gonna go back, yeah, we had an earlier question here.
Hi, Alexis Ben Bassett, Benbassat. I live at 43 Briarwood Drive. I just have a few questions. One, regarding the lights, you were saying that you would turn them off at 9 o'clock every night, but could you just have the lights on when you have the special events? Why do they need to be on every single night till 9 o'clock?
Yeah, people come in at night, clean, do other maintenance and so forth, so you have people.
That park in that lot?
But they can't park like right in front of the building. I mean, how
well,
many
they do,
cleaning people
yeah.
are we talking about? They could just park right in front of the building, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And the building is always lit up the entire night, so that should give them plenty of light if they park in front of the building. I see the lights on in the school all night long. I have a puppy, so I'm outside a lot, and I always see it brightly lit. My other question is, if you did widen the driveway, you said that the concern is speeding and that if you widen it, people would use that extra space. Couldn't you just put cones during the day so they can't veer off into those spots? And if it's a carpool line, I've been on there's so many carpool lines. No one's moving fast. I mean, you're inching forward. So there's no concern of speed there as well. So.
The question about the cones, we prefer not to put cones, just number one, they're not really attractive. I mean, they would be there every day. But the other thing too is, cones are, believe it or not, this is insane, but they're trip and fall hazards. People trip over them, and we try to only use them during like emergency or temporary situations. So I hope that answers that question. And the other question about the lighting, right? Was,
Yeah.
So the lights, you know, we've agreed to turn them on and off 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. I think we're trying to stick with that, given you know the different things the school does. You know, we're hoping that that's it exceeds the requirements of the ordinance, and that the board is favorable to that. We can continue to have the conversation, but that's what we've asked for.
I mean, I don't know if this is something you guys would know, if there's any other instance of a parking lot in a residential area in town with this much light. I haven't seen it. I mean, you're talking about the cones are unattractive. What's unattractive is the Field of Dreams, as he said, in our backyard till 9 o'clock every night for just a handful of activities a year. It seems like a lot. For 10 activities, we have to deal with this now. And I haven't noticed that much parking, you know, maybe a couple days a year where they're parked all over the neighborhood, and it's fine. We don't mind it. I'd rather that than all these lights in my backyard.
Thank you.
Thank
for the
you.
testimony. We're going to continue with questions, but before we get to comments period. So let this gentleman come up, and then you can have opportunity.
Commonality here. David Ben Bassett, same spelling, 43 Briarwood Drive. A couple quick questions. There was a lot of Americans with Disability Act requirements mentioned in terms of compliance. Is there anything that's not in code right now that you're trying to comply to with respect to building the new lot?
Specifically, it's the number of spaces. The 70, right now, let's start from the beginning. Right now, there are only 2 ADA spaces on site. The 71 spaces that are there require 3. And then with the additional spaces, we require 7.
But excluding the proposed additional lot, with the current lot, you can come up to code by just making one of those spots ADA compliant.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, and then the other thing I heard mentioned several times is that, you know, with respect to building a new lot and adding the lighting, it was, you know, there were safety considerations. Are there specific safety ordinances that require a certain amount of lighting or whatever, or that's just a judgment call?
Ordinances tend to hover right around 0.5 foot candle, which is the measurement of light. Some ordinances require more than that, some require less. As an industry standard, we typically stick with 0.5 because, like I said, that's the light level that I think I was just saying this outside, so I didn't say this before, but that's the kind of light level. If you drop something on the ground at 0.5 foot candles, you'll just be able to see that thing that you dropped, if it was your key, something like that. Below that, it starts blending in with the pavement, and that's why that light level's used.
So with respect to that light level, again, excuse my ignorance on this topic, I don't know anywhere near as much as the gentleman at One Briarwood Drive, but the bollards that he mentioned, which would essentially illuminate the pathways, and presumably if you put them on the perimeter of the existing parking lot, that wouldn't suffice? And if not, why?
It would suffice, but I should curb what I'm saying here. It would suffice in lighting a walkway. We use bollard lights a lot on walkways.
Mm-hmm.
The problem that we find is bollard lights are usually only 4 or 5 feet tall, and they don't have the right amount of throw to meet like the middle of a road, for example. So if there's like something in the road and the car has to avoid it, they won't be able to see it if the bollard is lighting that area, because the bollard doesn't throw light far enough to see the center of the road. So that's why you don't see every parking lot with just bollard lights. We need the lights up high to meet the requirements of that 0.5 foot candle. And like I said before, we've tried to do it with lowest intensity fixtures on the shortest poles possible. I would make the poles shorter if I could. It's just I also have to get a fire truck through there, so that's why they're at 15 feet.
Okay. I'll move on from that. So back to the pathway real quick in terms of the congestion with respect to carpool or other events. The issue was mentioned. Could you put up cones to slow people down? Or I mean, what about something as simple as speed bumps?
Speed bumps are an option. Again, they're.
I mean, if the speed of traffic is if that's what we're really concerned about.
Yeah, I mean. The idea behind traffic calming is like speed bumps is like the last resort. We try not to do speed bumps because they can damage a car's suspension and they're uncomfortable to go over, that kind of thing. So it's true. It's why we call it traffic calming. There's a whole study about traffic calming, and even just you see on roads people slow down for the darndest things, and one of them is gentle bends on a narrow road. People are going to just generally slow down, and I know maybe for the queuing there's not a lot of speed happening on this road, but just in general we want to promote a slower kind of narrower feel to get people to just.
So then with respect to the new proposed lot, are you currently envisioning, or have you guys modeled out or provided to the board any study of rerouting the traffic pattern and what that would specifically look like?
For what specifically? For like queuing?
Queuing during the day, and then again, I've heard a lot of mention of the events of the evening. I want to keep it to questions. I don't want to make a comment. So with respect to the traffic pattern for queuing for pickup and drop off, what?
We didn't do a specific study on like how many cars we would anticipate to use that as the pickup and drop off during those times. Based on Pingree's observations, though, there is a need for some of those spaces for that time. But to answer your direct question, we didn't do a parking study or anything like that.
Right, and I'm correct in town. I assume there's no specific ordinance with respect to schools and residential areas, or even in commercial areas, number of parking spots per number of people using a particular facility.
There are different parking ordinances.
Oh, there are?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. There you go. I didn't know that.
Yeah, we have a whole parking code. We talk about it lots of. Come back.
Well, no, the only reason I ask is because people brought up several times is the example Hartshorn School has 400 students and has 68 spots, and why do you need an additional 70 for a 288-person school? Okay.
But there are minimum parking requirements.
Okay. That's all I had then.
Thank you. Okay, you had a question. Come on up, please. Come up
and identify yourself for the record, please.
Just get your exercise in.
Neil Ehrman, 1 Briarwood Drive, ERMAN. So, I just want to get something straight here. We're building a 40-spot parking lot for 7 or 8 events that happen throughout the entire year.
No, that's one of the things we're building.
One of the things, but during the day, the lot is not fully occupied.
Again, I think that's what they said.
Okay. Okay. So instead of doing this lot, why don't you, like, for the 7 days, you know, Giro Park is not used all the time, and maybe do a shuttle service for all the grandparents and the parents for those 7 days that you're concerned about, and just shuttle them from, let them park in Giro, and you can shuttle them. I mean, it's a half a block. It's not, save a lot of money for the school, you know.
Let me make a comment here.
Yeah.
The Giroux parking lot can only be used for recreational purposes. The municipal attorney has so stated. When the township received money to buy Giroux Park, which included the parking lot, it got money from the state, and the requirement of the state was that that parking lot can only be used for recreational purposes, period.
Well, there goes that thought.
Thank you. Yeah, yes, sir, you come on up.
Sandy Kimmel, is the sound measurement that you talked about at 65 decibels, would it be cumulative? Because in my particular case, and for the residents on Briarwood Drive, we're getting noise from 2 directions. There's usually a line going on to White Oak Ridge Road, and in back, for the traffic that's idling there as the people queue up. If you're putting in a parking lot there when people are starting in the noise level, I think there's going to be cumulatively higher when you have 2 sources, and that's during the queue up time, so when the visitors are coming, there's a lot of traffic on both sides of my house. So I would ask if that's being considered in determining whether or not the noise requirements are being violated.
Okay, before you provide a response, I think what we're seeing tonight and hearing tonight are questions with regard, you know, as Dan brought up, to the noise component of the EIS, which is missing from this. So I think what makes sense, where we continue to field a lot of questions on this without having expert testimony who's comfortable and confident on it, I'd like to poll our board if we feel that we'd like to continue and proceed as is with the testimony we have, or if there is a desire to have them go back, revise the EIS, and provide additional testimony on noise. So those who feel in favor of wanting to receive more information on noise, given the type of questions, I'd like a poll if you feel that the EIS should be supplemented or revised to reflect a noise component. Yes. Okay, a yes. And those who feel that the applicant, we're ready to continue
I don't know whether we
hearing.
need to tell them how to present their application. They haven't given us any testimony on noise. No information, no testimony.
Right, so the question is,
Is it our obligation to say, hey, this is lacking, this is their application? If this is what they think is good enough, and we don't think it's good enough, they have to prove their entitlement to their request. So I don't know whether I think that I want them, I'm not gonna tell them how to make their application. If they think they're.
Right, but we as the board have the opportunity to request of them, say, go back, please
Right.
provide additional.
Maybe what we ought to do is hear from our township engineer as to this issue. The issue as I understand it, was posed by the chairwoman, was whether or not we have enough information on the question of sound generation.
I think that, there could be more testimony provided if, there are devices you can go out and measure, sound, and you have more information with regard to the gentleman that asked about, I think it was you, Sandy, that asked about how many decibels is a normal conversation, so we had some basis of comparison. We had more testimony in that regard.
Well, let me maybe bring this to a head. I would say 2 things. I have a hard job believing we have to conduct a sound study for conforming parking
Just
lot.
trying to respond to some of the questions
But,
being asked.
that being said, I get the crankiness off my chest. We are happy to come back with a sound expert and provide expert testimony on this issue at the next meeting. So, in an effort to try to put this issue to bed, we would be willing to do that.
Can I say something else?
Thank you for offering that. Okay, go ahead.
No, for me it's also very important the light issue, because they are asking for a waiver, and I don't think that they should be asking for a waiver.
Well, that's for us as the board to decide, and they
Okay.
provided testimony on that, so let's just stick on
Okay.
the noise thing for a moment. Thank you. Yes, but they've provided their testimony
Okay.
and information on that. But with regards to noise, that's the issue that's
Okay.
brought up tonight, is that we don't know that we have complete or enough information to make the decision on that, and whether or not that's part of the application. Go
So
ahead,
I-
Lisa.
In the township code, we do have a noise ordinance.
Sure.
Whether it would apply in this case, I don't know, but it.
It
you might
usually
wanna
tracks the
refer to it.
DEP, which is, 65, 55.
Okay, counsel.
Okay.
Let's see.
So do you want to conclude your testimony today?
Well,
or you
yeah,
wanna
we have our
proceed?
planner to testify, but I think I'd rather just save him for next
Well,
time,
then-
because his testimony is cumulative in any event, so. If we're gonna come back and address the noise. Are there any other questions? I just wanna finish with, make sure we're done with Mr. Thompson.
Appreciate that.
I have one more question. If this parking lot gets built and you have, let's say even 10 or a dozen, reasons to use it at night, will the parking lot be lit every single night till 9 p.m.?
Well,
When
that's
school's
our,
closed,
that
or
was
is it
our,
just gonna be lit for the events?
well, our proposal was to light it every day till 9.
Would it be a compromise to just light it on the evenings that there's events, especially if,
I mean, we can talk about that among ourselves before the next meeting. I mean, my question is, how do you do that? Control it versus having an automated system that makes
Control it
sure
from
it's
the
off
building.
every night.
I mean, the maintenance
It's
people.
programmable, I don't
I
know.
think there's
Separate system.
We'd have to make sure that, well, you don't know what goes on in our building, but we just have to know that, that's all. I'm not suggesting we can't do it, I'm just saying it's a
I
question.
think, yeah, I appreciate that. I think in addition to the noise, I think we'd appreciate
Sure.
you going back and
Yeah, we will.
finding out what we can do regarding the lights
We will.
that we heard about regarding the residential
We certainly
impacts.
will.
Okay, additional questions, for this, we're gonna see the engineer tonight and then not have testimony, okay. And for the public, any final questions for the engineer here? Understanding what we just said, we're gonna have more opportunity for more hearing. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Okay, so,
We need a carry date, then, we'll need a carry date. How much time do you think you will need to prepare?
I mean, we could do this pretty quickly. I have a guy in mind in terms of the noise I've used in other manners, so.
the next meeting is the,
Well, our next meeting is February 6th.
that's very soon, is that enough?
I have one application on February 6th.
Okay. And then the February 20th.
I already have 2 applications scheduled.
Okay.
So we need to be February 6th. or March
I think I could do it for February 6th, but I won't know till tomorrow.
Just the next one.
So if we could carry it till then, I'll let Eileen know. And then if we have to carry it further, we will.
Okay. Well, we've heard that we're gonna receive noise testimony, but as a
And planner.
and
And will you provide a report, a report on the noise?
I don't, if I can get a letter report of some kind from him, it's a tight schedule, but I'd have somebody come testify, obviously.
You can supplement by testimony.
so you'll provide a supplement to the EIS via testimony? is
Yeah,
what you're-
yeah, it would actually, well, I'll talk to Brad at what form it'll take, but yes.
Okay. And that's what you're offering to do, okay, excellent. So
So what-
February 6th, unless,
Well,
Unless
let's just talk about this for carrying it, because the applicant has already noticed all of the public members for tonight. The applicant's asking to carry this application till February 6th, in which case no further notice will be given to you. You're not going to be getting another certified letter. So the application's on for February 6th. If for any reason the applicant's unable to attend the Feb 6th meeting because your witness isn't prepared, let's just talk about procedure so that we would announce it on February 6th, but possibly we could put it on the website as well if we knew in advance. Would that be possible?
I'm sure it could.
Okay, so just check the website before Feb 6 to confirm whether it's on or not. It should be on, but if it's not, they'll provide a carry date for you. So you know.
Let's state clearly that it's 7:30 in this room.
Right, 7:30, of course.
Okay, so application, this is 18013, will be carried per this discussion, and, right, we'll still discuss all the remaining, the planner and the testimony
Great.
at that time. Thank you for coming. Anything further on this application for tonight? We are set, and that is all that we have. Thank you to the
Great.
members
Thank
of the
you all.
public and the team for coming. Do we have then a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. We're trying to do it
Actually, I think the noise is not enough.
So prove it.
Because the municipality has stated that if there's a 25